Okay, we are now recording today's session of successful divorce strategies for stay-at-home moms. I want to thank you all for signing up for this. I know that we are under very difficult times as we're doing this. A lot of us are kind of locked into our homes, and there's a lot of uncertainty, which makes the situation worse if you are going through divorce or thinking about divorce. So we want to be sensitive to that. And by the way, when I say we, I have with me here Andres Montes de Oca. My apologies for mispronouncing that, Andres. He's going to speak to you about the financial picture of this, which I know is really, it's always very important, but now even more so. So I'm going to get started. I also have some questions that you all have shared with me. And I can't go into the details, but you've given me some broad-based things that I think are going to apply to a lot of people here. So I'm going to do that. We're not going to take live questions during this presentation because this is being recorded and the recording is going to be shared. But if you're logged on and there's something that you want to ask, you can always shoot me an email at lbarkis@barkislaw.com, and I will try to get to it during this presentation. But I'm gonna get rolling here because I know everybody's time is valuable. So we're gonna start with the place where we always start, which is you. And generally, what I tell people is that for women, especially stay-at-home moms who are really holding down the fort and taking care of everybody, there's a tendency to think of everybody but yourself and what will happen to the kids, even what will your family think. What's going to happen to your spouse. And the thing is, and this may feel unnatural, but this is the time that you absolutely have to be thinking about yourself. You've got to put yourself first, because if you don't do that, you won't be able to help everybody. You will not be able to help your children navigate this process. You will not be able to make the decisions you need to make. So one of the things we'll be talking about quite a bit is staying resourced and making sure that you are taken care of. And now more than ever, going through these uncertain times, that is extremely important that you do that. So we're going to start by talking about the kids, because I know that is foremost on the minds of any parent, and you all are stay-at-home moms, so I know those kids are very near and dear to you. A lot of people are very concerned about what will happen to kids when they divorce. And that is a legitimate concern, because obviously this is going to change their lives. But people often think that getting divorced is the worst thing for kids. And before I go further, let me just emphasize that I'm not telling you to divorce or not to divorce. But I want to make sure what you understand is that it's the conflict that is really worse for the kids. I've done a lot of work, not only in divorce, but also as a guardian ad litem, and I've talked to kids one-on-one. I've also have a lot of training on this, and there's some resources I'm going to tell you about. And what's most important to kids is that the normalcy is maintained as much as possible. And by normalcy, I mean their relationships. A lot of times kids may lose touch with a parent. That's definitely difficult. It's very painful. And when their routines get upset, that also, especially the older kids, that bothers them quite a bit. But it's also the conflict that is quite a problem for kids. And I'm kind of moving on to slide number 3, in case you're following along with me here. Basically, there was a long-term study done of kids post-divorce, adult children who went through divorce, and the findings were different from what everybody believed. A lot of thoughts were that they would not have good relationships, that they would be doing terribly. A lot of those kids were doing very well because the conflict was removed. So again, this is not a should you divorce, should you not divorce. Those are certainly decisions that you have to make. But what I want you to be very aware of when you think about your children is that it is the amount of conflict going on that is going to be key for them. And I know this is probably a very challenging time for those of you where you're at home. If you're at home with your spouse who now might be home more, there might be a lot more opportunities for conflict. And I would urge you to be aware of that. And again, this kind of goes back to staying resourced and and taking care of yourself, because the less conflict that your kids experience, the better off they'll be, and especially now when everybody is obviously concerned about what's going on. Moving on from the kids, our other biggest aspect to this picture is the financial planning and divorce. And Andres is going to go into more of that than I will, but basically, one of the things that we emphasize so much is understanding the financial picture and creating a plan. I can't emphasize enough how much planning and strategy is important here, because we all know the people who had a terrible divorce. Maybe it was a friend, maybe it was your parents. It's certainly somebody, they're out there. No one ever wants to be in that situation. Probably one of the reasons you signed up for this is because you don't want that to happen. Or you don't want a bad result, you don't want a nightmare divorce that your kids get dragged through. You don't want any of those things to happen. The most important step that you can take to avoiding that is understanding your finances. Because one of the biggest mistakes that people make when they get divorced is that they fight over money they don't have. And that probably sounds ridiculous, but you probably know somebody who's done it, because they didn't understand the numbers, they were afraid of it, and they wanted to believe that there was something more out there, and they ended up spending a lot of resources fighting over something and getting nothing back. So part of the financial picture is alimony. And as a stay-at-home parent, I know this is a big part of it. I mean, I will tell you generally that Florida has alimony laws that they're not very fixed. We don't have guidelines here in Florida. It goes by what's called need and ability to pay. And I'm actually going to pause because somebody had sent in some really great questions here that I wanted to address about this, because again, a lot of you as stay-at-home parents have spent a lot of years at home. You did not have those income earning years. Maybe you put off a career. Maybe you did not start one. The compensation for that is the number of years of alimony. There's really no formula that totals up, this is what you would have earned, this is what you should be paid out. It doesn't quite work that way. But when it comes to alimony, the time that you've spent staying at home is certainly a factor in that. There's an awful lot to alimony. There's an awful lot of variables to it that are more than we can get into now. But right now, I want to make you aware of that, especially if you've been a stay-at-home parent for a significant amount of time. It is certainly part of the equation that you would receive alimony for a period of time, or perhaps even indefinitely. Going back to strategy, because again, what this really comes down to, and I know that may sound like a strange word, but to me, strategy means you need to know what it is that you're trying to do, what it is that you're trying to accomplish, and how you're going to get there. And one of the things you'll hear me say a lot is not to hire aggressive lawyers. It's a very tempting thing. People get very scared. Sometimes your spouse will say, well, I'm going to hire the toughest lawyer. I'm going to destroy you. I'm going to do all these bad things, because people say a lot of stuff when they're emotional. And then there are certain people who have emotional or mental health issues that kind of respond that way to these situations. Even if your spouse is telling you, I'm hiring this really strong, aggressive pit bull type lawyer, it is not in your best interest to do that as well. I would strongly encourage you to find somebody, first of all, that you can speak to. I mean, I've talked to seminar participants who have told me, I'm afraid to speak to my own lawyer. And to me, that's very troubling. I don't know how you get through this process working with somebody that you can't even have a conversation with. And the other thing that concerns me is a lot of people tell me, I don't even know what's going on. All this money is being spent. There's all this back and forth. I don't know what it is what we're even trying to accomplish. You should not be in that situation. At the end of a meeting with an attorney, you should know where you're intending to go, how you're intending to get there. That strategy might change, but you should at least have that roadmap, and you definitely should have that roadmap during the process. I'm going to move on to my Johnny Depp slide, and again, certainly not making light of anything, not making light of anybody's issues, but I do hear this one a lot. I have the craziest spouse. I have the most difficult. In fact, one of the questions that came to me had to do with mental health issues and how to address them. Again, the first thing I would start with is an aggressive strategy is the absolute worst thing to deal with. An aggressive spouse, one that you believe is crazy, or one that you believe has mental health issues, because that's only going to make them more aggressive. It's only going to make the process worse for you. And some of you might be wondering whether you only have two choices. I mean, I see this a lot. And if you saw the Netflix show Marriage Story, which I'm not sure I'd recommend, but if you did, it seems like there's kind of two choices here. Either you find the really aggressive lawyer who is all in, or you find the person who's so nice but just can't get it done. I can tell you, I've done this for over 20 years. There is a middle ground. There's the person who can stand up for you, who is strategic, who can think this through, who isn't afraid to fight for you, but is going to do it in a smart way that benefits you. And my slides are freezing on me. Okay, there we go. All right, staying resource. We've talked about this. It all comes back to you, especially now more than ever. If you are going through this process, or even think you're going to go through this process, the first thing you really want to do is know where your resources are. When I meet with people, before I meet with people, I do a very detailed intake. And some of the questions I will ask are, what are your sources for support? Who do you draw on, whether they're community sources, whether they're certain people, and what that looks like for you. Now, for some people, especially if you've been very involved in raising children and at home, and sometimes your family is far away, there are people that look at that and say, I don't have those resources. If that is you, don't feel bad about that. You're certainly not alone in that. There's a lot of people who are in that situation. And what I would tell you, and I would encourage you, is that those resources are out there. One of the things we do is we look for those community resources for you, and we help you find those resources so that you have something to help you get through this, so that you have some form of support system. And the other thing I talk about is an activity that I refer to as your pause. Your pause, to me, is the activity that allows you to stop the process, to stop the anxiety, to stop, to basically kind of not necessarily check out, but basically get a break from things. For some people, I mean, I'm very involved in sports and fitness, so for me that might be a long hike or a run. Other people, like they do knitting, they do crossword puzzles. Some people will just go and clean the house. It's whatever suspends that mental activity and allows you a place of peace. And these are things that we draw out before we begin the process, so that you have them and you know where to go, because we know this is going to be difficult for you. And the key is to try to find something that's helpful to you. Now, again, just to reiterate the point I made about aggressive lawyers versus nice lawyers. And again, I know a lot of people get into this process, they get scared, spouse does something they shouldn't have done, or something scary, or makes a threat, and people say, I need to go out and hire that aggressive lawyer. Again, there's a middle ground. There are people out there who can work with you, who can work with your emotions and help you find support during this time, but can also be effective in this process. I'm sorry, my slides are freezing up on me. There we go. Okay, so now that we've started with you and we have a baseline of resources and support, what we do next is we look at your life plan. And that's something that finances are going to come into play, and Andres is going to talk about as well. But one of the things that helps get through this process is remembering that there is something coming. There is something after this process. People get so consumed by divorce that they think that there's nothing else out there. But the reality is your life will go on. And what we want you to look at is, what are you going to do next? What are your financial goals? What are your career goals, which you may or may not have depending on where you are. And I know that as stay-at-home moms, you may have put that career on hold, but there might be something that you want to do. And this would be the opportunity. This would be the opportunity to do it. So we work with you to create that life plan. Excuse me. So that again, you have a focus for what comes after this process. So again, just to sum up what we've talked about, never ever hire an aggressive lawyer, especially if you have a difficult spouse. Make sure whoever you work with has a strategy. You know where this is going. And also plan for your life so you know where you're going after this process. Okay, we'll talk a little bit, we've got some general slides here. I'm going to kind of breeze through them because I know you all have this packet. A lot of this has to do with, this is basically general legal information for those of you who want the background, or also those of you who might be doing this on your own. There's residency requirements, which you guys can read about. This is a list of the forms that you would want to fill out again if you were doing this process on your own. The required parenting class and some of the processes for people who are able to get through this on their own. Sometimes people file jointly and they can navigate the process. So some reading on that. We have some family court resources that are also helpful and useful for you. Just some information on name change, something to think about. A lot of times, especially if you have small children, people sometimes don't want to change their name because they don't want the kids to feel as though they're being divorced from their parent as well. That choice is solely up to you. Status quo is kind of an important one, especially right now. Depending on what county you're in, Dade, Broward, and I believe Monroe as well have what are called status quo orders, which mean that if and when you file for divorce, there is an order that nobody can change anything. You can't cancel the insurance. You can't cash out accounts. You can't move the kids out of state, things like that. It's something to definitely be aware of. And if you're going to go through this process, you'd certainly want to discuss with the lawyer if you're working with the lawyer, or if not, you're definitely going to want to look at that order so that you understand it. Just a couple things about resources and getting through the process. We certainly talked a lot about those emotional and support resources, but on the financial side, one thing to keep in mind is sometimes it's good to, as we're doing right now as a society, to prepare for the worst, hope for the best. A lot of times people are still concerned that financial resources may be cut off or may be lessened. Perhaps your spouse is the one who manages the finances. The courts will provide for temporary support during a divorce. I can tell you that the dockets are very crowded. They were certainly very crowded before the current situation and the restrictions. They're only going to be more so. One thing to think about is having some sort of emergency fund, either funds of your own, maybe borrowing from friends or family. Maybe there's a source for a loan, things like that. I'm not going to get into too much detail about that. Again, it's something I want to point out that if you're going to go through the process, it's something that you want to discuss, maybe discuss with the lawyer that you're working with, or discuss with your family and friends so that you have that. And also that's going to kind of come into play of knowing your budget as well, which I know we've talked about, and I think we'll address a little bit more as we go forward with this. Just a couple different resources for you, again, for people who are doing this on your own. There are forms on the clerk's websites. There are also, in addition to hiring a lawyer to represent you throughout the entire process, there's something called monitored law representation or unbundled legal services, which means that you can have somebody help you with just certain aspects. Maybe you've drafted papers on your own and you want somebody to review them. Maybe your spouse gave you an agreement and you want that reviewed. And a quick note on that, I always tell people who want to do this on their own that if you only spent 2 hours with a lawyer in this process, and I'm not necessarily recommending that, that may not be enough, but if that's all you could do or would do, you want to speak to somebody at the beginning so that you have a very clear understanding of your rights, of what the picture should look like. And you absolutely want to speak to somebody before you sign an agreement. A lot of times, especially when I'm representing stay-at-home moms, people will come in and say, my spouse gave me this agreement. And I'll look at it and say, well, do we know anything about the finances here? And the answer is no, but he said it's fair or something like that. And you know what? It might be. You know, you might have a very decent, fair spouse who is making a fair agreement as the law says, or you might have somebody who's kind of interpreting the word fair. But I personally would be very wary about signing agreements when you don't understand the background on them. So definitely talk to a lawyer about that beforehand. And these are just some links and reading that you all can do. You have these slides, you have this presentation. And so I'll kind of leave that for you. And again, I have this tendency to repeat things when I think that they're important. And to me, I'm going to go back to this aggressive divorce attorney once again, because I hear it so much. I see it online. I see people telling me this is what I need. This is what I better do. And again, I want to leave you with a little bit more food for thought on that particular topic, because basically the court system itself is adversarial. A lot of people have described it as broken. Personally, I would agree with that. I don't think it is the best place for families. And the reason why is because of its adversarial nature, because it puts one person against the other. Now, there's certain situations, especially, again, you might have some mental health issues, which somebody wrote in about, or you might have just a very difficult person who is just not going to resolve this in any way, shape, or form that's fair or right. You may have to go to court, but you want to keep this, you want to lessen the adversarial nature of this as much as possible. And hiring aggressive attorneys will not do that. It will not be good for your mental health. It will not be good for your kids' long-term outcome. And frankly, more often than not, it doesn't get you a better result. More often than not, when I speak to people who have hired somebody who is aggressive, they aren't happy about it. Granted, a lot of those are people who are changing lawyers who have decided it hasn't worked, but I've talked to a lot of people after the process who said this did not work well for them. So to quote Mr. Wonderful, I don't know if there's any Shark Tank fans out there, stop the madness on that one. I know it's an easy trap to fall into. That's why this is a lucrative business. I mean, keep in mind, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and think about whether you want to add to that or whether you want to put your funds towards your kids' college or your own retirement. So again, to just kind of capitalize on that a little bit, most cases settle. And this is something people aren't aware of. A lot of times people don't know the process and think we have to go to court. 90+%, I would say 95+% of cases will settle without going to court, without going in front of a judge, which means that most issues, no matter how difficult they feel to you, no matter how difficult you think your situation is, chances are it can be resolved. So why do people go to court? Generally, people go to court because their lawyers say we have to go to court. And sadly, sometimes again, that may be true, but first of all, you don't know that until you've exhausted all possibilities of trying to resolve this. Even the court, even a judge won't see you until you've tried to work it out. So if somebody's telling you court is your only remedy, I would get a second opinion on that. I'll kind of leave it at that. But why do lawyers tell you to go to court? Well, there's really two reasons. One is that you have somebody who doesn't have experience and doesn't know how to negotiate or get a fair settlement for you. And two, again, this is a very lucrative field for some people who use it that way. You have somebody who just wants money from the litigation. And if you speak to those people you know who went through the bad divorce, a lot of people will tell you, I feel like they just took my money. Don't be that person. Don't be that statistic. We're here today to see that that doesn't happen to you. And I know that you're here taking your time out, especially during this difficult time, to make sure that that doesn't happen as well. Okay, so just talk real briefly about what we do, and then I'm gonna get to some of these questions that are coming in here. Basically, Sustainable Family Solutions is my company that I created after nearly 20 years in this field. I'm actually in my 21st year as an attorney, most of that time as a divorce lawyer. And during that time, I've pretty much done everything on the spectrum here. I've done collaborative, I am collaboratively trained, and I've done mediation, was a certified mediator for a number of years. I've worked with children as a guardian ad litem. I've done a lot of litigation, and I've looked at what worked, what didn't work. I've done a lot of research. I've talked to clients, judges, everybody I could to find out what is the best formula for this? What is the best thing we can do? And what we do is we plan, strategize, and prepare. We have a consultation that is very in-depth, that is very thorough, and we do a lot of preparation before. We gather as much information as possible personally and financially so that we can give you the best strategy possible, both a legal strategy and a financial strategy. We help you create a resource plan so that you can get through this process. We know how to resolve things. We know how to go to court. I've litigated plenty, but again, 90+% of the cases are going to settle. So wouldn't you want the person who can negotiate more so for you? That's what we do. We know how to negotiate. We also know how to neutralize the tactics of aggressive lawyers. We're very solution focused. We come up with plans for you, and client satisfaction is very important. I mean, I will share with you, I have more cases than I need. I turn away quite a bit of work at this point, and I'm not doing this to see how many cases I can get. I'm doing this because I believe in this model. I believe in what I'm telling you. I believe that this is a better way for you and your family. And with that in mind, again, one of these days I'm going to change this slide because I cannot give you a pain-free divorce, but I can make it less painful. I can make it less financially devastating for you. What we offer that is rather unique is a very comprehensive consultation. It includes an audit of your financial and other circumstances. It talks about when to file, which right now is going to be a very, very big issue going forward with possible job losses, income losses. Again, I'll let Andres talk more about the finances, but a lot of asset values are down if you're invested in the market, things like that, alimony concerns, child support concerns. So when to file is certainly a big issue these days. Normally we offer that package we offer that consultation. That's 90 minutes of meeting time with me plus substantial preparation time beforehand. And that's me personally, I'm the only one who does these. Normally we offer that for $495. I am offering a special at this time for the participants in here, some of whom I know can't log on. I do see some emails coming in. I don't know if you all are trying to log on and having a problem with that. So we are definitely going to take care of you. For anybody who has signed up for this, we are discounting that rate to $450. And again, the other thing I do with that, I offer something that nobody I know of does. I will give you a money back guarantee for that. If you do not feel that that service was valuable to you, if you do not feel that I have helped you or provided anything to you, I will refund your money. Because again, I stand by what I do. I believe very strongly in helping people, or at the very least trying to help people. And so I will stand by that and offer a guarantee. And before I turn this over, I'm going to see what I can do about these questions. I've got a few questions coming in. We've talked about the years at home as a stay-at-home mom and the income loss on that. Another question that I think is probably important, it was just somebody who wrote in here, and probably for a few others here, is wanting to stay home with your children, especially until they get into school and are not as home full time, and maybe you have preschool age kids, maybe you have elementary school age kids. Again, excellent question that will really depend on the facts and circumstances of your particular case. And so again, I encourage you, those are things that you really want to flesh out with a lawyer that you feel comfortable with, because part of that is going to be the financial equation, and just some things to consider. Is there enough income for you to stay home and not work during that time? What about where you're living? What is the house situation, the equity in the house, the ability to keep it? Would you need to move? So a bunch of facts and circumstances with that. And another, I'm going to answer just one more question before I turn this over, and this has to do with mental health issues and 50-50 parenting time, which again, just to kind of touch on it, we are trending more and more towards parents having equal time with their kids if they're able to actually have that time and participate. Mental health issues may affect that depending on the severity of them, depending on what they are. Again, very facts and circumstances. It's something I would discuss in detail with a lawyer that you trust, and also how you present those things are very important, because again, if you have a spouse who you believe has some mental health challenges and you file something with the court that is then served on them that says you have all these problems, you cannot care for the children, how is that person going to react? How are they going to react around the children? So how you deal with that is going to be very important. And so I'm going to turn it over right now. Andres has been on here very patiently listening, and he is not only a financial advisor, but a wonderful person who is a great resource for people going through this. This is a cause that's near and dear to his heart, so much so that he's working from home with his beautiful family, but he still showed up here today to talk to you and tell you some things about the financial picture. I encourage you to reach out to him with questions. He's a very valuable resource for you during this process. So let me see if I can get this off my screen. And Andres, I'm going to let you take over.
Thank you, Lori, and all that are here present. I just really want to thank you again for the kind words and all of, obviously, your insight and the opportunity to present. So let me go ahead and just jump here and bring my screen over. Okay. Now, Lori, can you see there the screen?
I don't see it. Oh, I see like a line on it.
Let's try again.
There you go. You got it.
Right. Okay. So again, my name is Andres Montes de Oca. Lori did a phenomenal job pronouncing that last name. I certainly got a lot of heat for that when I was little. But again, Merrill Lynch Wealth Management, that's the firm that I am with. And I will keep this as short and general as possible. Obviously, like Lori had mentioned, a lot of facts and circumstances to everybody's case, and everybody's obviously going to have a different scenario, but certainly something to be addressed. So, very important to me. Like Lori had mentioned, I've had personal experience with this. I was a young child when my parents got divorced, so I totally understand the severity of this and the impact at home and with finances. And just recently, I just saw my brother go through it, and obviously it's not fun. But really, my goal is to provide my clients with a solid relationship that helps them better understand the strategies available to them, and really take the path going forward and how we can resolve the issues. It's never easy, but certainly it's a lot easier when you've got a team of individuals that strive to better families each and every day. So I see that in Lori and certainly in myself. And to kind of piggyback what Lori has said, you know, this is really building a team around yourself, not just on the financial side, but obviously with counsel. And really, we encourage you to arm yourself with professionals such as Lori and myself, and a CPA, and really just attack the situation with the best guidance possible. So, you know, there's a tremendous amount of valuable information that individuals don't even know they have available to them, and it's really just building a team around you. So Merrill becomes just another resource for you and your family in that way. So no matter how complex your financial picture is, we certainly address anything and everything involving money and investments, right? So we're not just an investment brokerage arm for Bank of America, but we certainly address insurance needs, trust and estate strategies, obviously the retirement planning and college savings for kids, but we also go as far as lending for new and existing properties. So a good example of that is, you have a property that's owned between you and your ex-spouse, and it needs to get refinanced and basically kept under your name. We certainly address that, can assist you with that. So our promise to our clients is really our promise to you. And this is a relationship. Once your divorce is finalized, we certainly do not go away. We're certainly here to listen to you. We don't do a lot of the speaking. We want to hear your circumstances, and we want to get to know you, and of course your family and the goals aligned with that. So my favorite line on this is clearly proactively offering you an unbiased advice, right? So credential wise and license wise, I am totally a stockbroker to the definition, but my incentive and my desire to be in this business is really to give you the most unbiased advice, only and ultimately to benefit you and your circumstances, right? And with that, we answer all the questions that you have, and we're here during good times and bad times. Certainly right now, if any of you follow the market, you're certainly seeing that there's a lot of ebbs and flows going on, a lot of emotion behind this COVID-19, and that's what we're here for. We're here to hold your hand and essentially get you through these difficult, dark moments. So after the divorce, we certainly begin to work with the resources that you currently have and execute with those goals. So what does that mean? This includes monthly cash flows, and that's important, and that's something that I'm certainly going to touch base on. But we address the necessities that need to be taken care of immediately, right? So if you need to find yourself another home or another place to live, if funding for your child's education is super important and that has to be number one on your priority, we address that as well. And of course, for those that may have kids or never had kids and are approaching that retirement, how much do you need to actually retire? And of course, it goes without saying, I've got to put an investment slide in this. A lot of folks are scared, especially now. But this is kind of giving you a picture. If you had $1 invested in 1970 and what that dollar would look like today, well, not today, in 2018. If you just kept it in cash, with inflation, you'd be looking at about $6.68. Now, the inverse, you have U.S. stocks. That's the top line. You have about $117 if it would have been invested properly in U.S. stocks. The difference there is substantial, right? So the goal here is to make sure that you don't outlive the money that you have, and make sure that it gives you enough to go through your daily expenses and monthly expenses and yearly expenses and everything that falls in between. And also, this is kind of showing you what your after-tax returns would be. So your strategy would be obviously to enter in a diversified portfolio, so you're not 100% exposure to stocks or 100% exposure to bonds. They all carry their risks, but blended, you would get a much higher return if you just invested in a diversified portfolio instead of just keeping it in cash. Now, cash flow planning, something that we certainly cannot ignore. And, being a part of your team, right, we're going to sit down and certainly analyze your budget, and we're going to get a plan in place. This is going to address the income that you have, whether you're working or not, but it's certainly going to address the alimony received, any dividends or interest because of the portfolio that you're going to be taking a part of. You may have a side business that you're starting, and that's going to have some income as well. And then, of course, we need to address the outflows, annual taxes, mortgages, simple living expenses, light, food, water, family support. You may have an individual that's a family member that you are providing care for. And charitable giving, that seems to be important to a lot of families, and we certainly address that and find a way to continue going. Now, we certainly live in a world where we leverage technology, and I think that you should be as well. And what we do is we create a reporting with proprietary algorithms that simulate different scenarios going forward and how that can impact your finances. And ultimately, this tool will help you in keeping track of your daily, monthly, and yearly goals. So it'll give you worst case scenario, best case scenario, and a high probability of you achieving those goals, which is in the middle. And it'll tell you all throughout your life expectancy. So starting today up until the day you expire, and if you want to leave something for the kids, grandkids, or if you want to leave it to charity. Ultimately, we also take into consideration that surprises do come up. There may be a health crisis, there may be another financial crisis, who knows? All we want to do is make sure that we can address each and every single scenario going forward. And now that you've finished with this chapter in your life, it does not mean that you're going to go about it alone. And to kind of piggyback again off of what Lori has said, you've got support along with your friends and family. You certainly have us here at the Merrill Lynch side to kind of walk you through with every stage of your financial life. Lastly, this is the opportunity to really get this negative and turn it into a positive. You're really going to start taking control of your financial life. You're going to address the issues that are going on today, and we're going to find solutions for them. And it's really just, we're going to rip this Band-Aid, we're going to get through it together, and we're going to make this negative turn into a positive for you and your family. And with all of that said, Lori, I'm going to turn it back to you. Obviously you've got a ton of questions lined up from those that are listening in and that are probably going to chime in later. But I also want to make myself available if anybody has questions.
Okay, and Andres, that was a fantastic presentation. Folks, I am receiving your emails. I know that some of you are trying to log on and you're having difficulties. I apologize profusely for that. This is the first time we are doing this. That's not an excuse. I just want you to know we're working out the kinks. I am recording this. I'm going to make sure you all have the recording, and I'm going to make sure that you have the opportunity to ask the questions that you need to ask. I do have one more that came in that I'm going to, I'll try to field the best I can. This had to do with post-judgment and enforcement of orders. Somebody was very concerned about that. Certainly always a difficult question, a very timely one. So let me give you some general background on how that works. There's different levels of enforcement. When somebody is paying what's called support, that's a much higher level of enforcement. Support is generally child support, spousal support in the form of alimony, and there are very, very strong enforcement remedies for that don't exist in the enforcement of something that is maybe a judgment or property. Sometimes part of the settlement is that you'll receive payment for your share of something, or there's supposed to be a payment of a debt. The enforcement of those kind of things is a little bit less in terms of the severity of it. How you can enforce those things, really the first question, and the person who asked this asked an excellent question, is it worth it to go forward? That is the question you should ask yourself. And certainly if you're hiring an attorney and trying to collect on child support or alimony or a judgment, one of the questions you want to ask that person is, can I do that? They probably can't answer that the first time you meet with them, because what you really need to know is, does your spouse have the ability, your ex-spouse or the person you made the agreement with, do they have the ability to pay this? Are they working? Do they have funds? What's going on? I mean, I suspect we're going to see quite a lot of child support and spousal support modifications coming up if there are layoffs. And I'm not here to alarm you. As Andres said, we're in this together. We're going to get through it, but it's something to think about. If your ex lost their job and said, I can't pay right now, I can't tell you that your modification will be 100% successful. Then again, if they pay you zero, I think that their strategy is not successful. These are things you really need to discuss with somebody. So I can't give you a specific answer, but what I would tell you is that you want to understand that situation. You want to know whether they have the ability to collect. And if you are hiring a lawyer to do that, you want to make sure that that lawyer clearly explains to you how they're going to figure out whether that can happen or not. You don't simply want to just go forward, spend a ton of money, and not recover. Although one more thing that I will touch on, there are services for people who have judgments for support. There are people that work on that can do that. I can certainly direct you to that if that's something you're looking for. And also the state of Florida will help with the collection of unpaid child support or spousal support. That's really all I have in terms of questions. Again, I want to thank you all for your incredible patience. I know we didn't get everybody on here. There is another presentation coming up this evening at 6 p.m. It is a little bit different. It is geared more towards women in the workforce, women breadwinners. But if anybody wants to get on that presentation, I'll certainly get you the link to do that, and I will try to get into the questions that I can. So again, thank you for everything, Andres. Great presentation. Thank you for being here. And with that, I think we're gonna sign off.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Okay. Take care. Thank you for being here.